Today I, Mrs. Neera Sharma, is going to explain you the class 10th history chapter, Nationalism in India. So this is your history book and these are the 4 chapters which are there in your syllabus. So now these are the 4 chapters: Nationalism in India, the rise of nationalism in Europe, the age of industrialization, print culture and the modern world. We are going to start with nationalism in India first. So, Indian nationalism developed as a concept during the Indian independence movement fought against the colonial British Raj. In this chapter, students, we are going to read about the feeling of nationalism in India, how this feeling of oneness spread in the Indians. In this chapter, we will continue our journey about the growth of nationalism in India from the year 1920. We have done this till the year 1990 in your previous class 9th. We will also be reading about the non-cooperation and the civil disobedience movements. We will explore how the Congress sought to develop the national movement. We'll understand how different social groups, peasants, tribals, women, workers, etc. participated in this movement, and we'll also read how this nationalism captured the imagination of people. Now, we are going to read about the First World War. First World War was fought from 1914 to 1919 between the Allied and the Central Powers. So the Allied powers were the Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Japan and US, and Central powers consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria and Ottoman Empire. So war always leads to hampering of social and economic conditions of a country. So the same were the effects on India, which as it was the colony was of the Britain at that time. So now the effects of the First World War on India. That war had adverse effects on India. The war led to a huge increase in defense expenditure, which was financed by war loans and increasing taxes. Custom duties were raised and income tax was introduced. This was the tax, children, which was introduced for the first time. People were not knowing about this tax earlier. So these are the few 1-mark questions which we'll be discussing at the end of this portion. Prices increased, doubling between 1913 and 1918. Forced recruitment in rural areas caused widespread anger, and crops failed in many parts of the India in 1918-19 and 1920-21, resulting in acute shortage of food. What is forced recruitment? Forcibly recruiting of the Indians into the war. Around 13 million people perished as a result of famines and influenza epidemic. So this was the condition, after the First World War, Indian condition. So when, India was undergoing all this, there was economic and this social conditions, such were the social and the economic conditions prevailing in India at this time, and a new leader, Mahatma Gandhi, appeared and he suggested a new mode of struggle. Okay, so what was that mode of struggle that he suggested? It was the Satyagraha. So Satyagraha, what is Satyagraha? It is a novel method of mass agitation which stressed on the power of truth and the need to search for truth. If the cause is true, then the physical force is not necessary to fight the oppressor. Who is the oppressor here? The Britishers. So the oppressor needs to be persuaded to see the truth, by appealing to his conscience instead of using violence. According to Mahatma Gandhi, this was the only weapon, children, which could unite all Indians. So this is it. Now we move to the Satyagraha movements which were organized by Mahatma Gandhi when he came back from South Africa. So you all must be knowing, you all have read in class 9 that he came back from South Africa where he had fought against this apartheid, racist regime apartheid. Okay, and when he came back to India, he started using this weapon here. So first of all, in the year 1916, this was the first Satyagraha launched by Mahatma Gandhi when he came back to India in Champaran. He traveled to Champaran in Bihar to inspire the peasants to struggle against the oppressive plantation system. Second Satyagraha was in the year 1917. He organized a Satyagraha to support the peasants of Kheda, district of Gujarat, who were affected by crop failure and plague epidemic, and they were demanding revenue relaxation. But this revenue relaxation was not given to them by the Britishers. So who went to their rescue? Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, and what was the method? Novel method, that was the satyagraha. So it is very simple to understand, children. So and also to remember the years 1916, 17 and 18. So in the year 1918, he went to Ahmedabad to organize Satyagraha movement among the cotton mill workers. So these movements were for improving the working conditions of the workers and also to increase their wages. So now, after Mahatma Gandhi gained success in all these three satyagrahas, he in the year 1919 he decided to launch a nationwide satyagraha against the Rowlatt Act. Now, what was this Rowlatt Act? Rowlatt Act, it gave government, the provision of the Rowlatt Act is it gave the government enormous powers. Which government? The British government, to repress political activities and allowed detention of political prisoners without trial for 2 years. What does this mean? That the British government was given lot of power to suppress the political activities, the activities which the freedom fighters were doing, and it allowed the detention of political prisoners in the prisons without trial for 2 years. So, and Gandhiji wanted a non-violent civil disobedience against it, and he started with a hartal on 6th of April. And what was done under this hartal? Rallies were organized in various cities, and workers went on strike in railway workshops, and shops were closed down. So now the consequences of the movement. The British administration decided to clamp down on the nationalists. And how did they clamp down? The local leaders were picked up from Amritsar, and Mahatma Gandhi was barred from entering Delhi, since Delhi was the hub of all these activities. On 10th April, the police in Amritsar fired upon a peaceful procession, provoking attacks on banks and post office and railway stations. Martial law, that is the law by the army rule, was imposed, and General Dyer took command. We are heading towards the Jallianwala Bagh incident, children, which was a very infamous incident in the year 1990. All these actions were going to be culminated into this infamous Jallianwala Bagh incident. And one more important thing which comes to the light is that Mahatma Gandhi had started it as a satyagraha movement, which was a non-violent movement, and all these activities and all these clamping down of the nationalists, etc., and the attack on the banks, post offices, railway stations, they were all violent activities. So Mahatma Gandhi will now think of stopping this movement. Now, Jallianwala Bagh incident, 13th April 1919. All these dates are very important. I'll be giving you a list of all the dates at the end. Now, Jallianwala Bagh incident, a large crowd had gathered in the enclosed ground to protest against the government's repressive measures and also to attend the annual Baisakhi fair. So many were unaware that the martial law had been imposed, but since they were not having any of the weapons, so they had assembled there just to attend this annual Baisakhi fair. So General Dyer, who had just taken command, he entered the area, blocked the exit points, opened fire on the crowd, killing hundreds. So why did he do this? His purpose was to create terror and awe in the minds of the satyagrahis so that they do not repeat this in future. And then, this Mahatma Gandhi, he decided to call off this civil disobedience movement. As I mentioned that this movement was started as a non-violent movement, and when Mahatma Gandhi saw that it was creating violence, he thought of calling off this movement. As the news of Jallianwala Bagh spread, crowds took to streets in many North Indian towns. There were strikes, clashes with the police, attacks on government buildings. The government also responded with brutal repression. How were they brutal? They started humiliating and terrorizing the satyagrahis. People were flogged, beaten, and many villages were bombed. And thus, seeing all this, Mahatma Gandhi became very unhappy. All his purpose had become a total failure. Satyagraha movement was a failure now, so he thought of calling off this movement. Now, a Khilafat committee. So Mahatma Gandhi, by this time, he had understood that unless and until we are united, we will not be able to get independence. So he thought of uniting the Hindus and the Muslims. So to launch a broad-based movement in India, Mahatma Gandhi thought of bringing Hindus and Muslims under one umbrella. One way of doing this was to take up the Khilafat issues. And before we move further, let us understand what is Khilafat issue. So as I had mentioned earlier, that the Allied powers were victorious over the Central powers in World War One. The First World War had ended with the defeat of Ottoman Turkey. So there were rumors that a harsh peace treaty was going to be imposed on the Ottoman emperor, who was the spiritual head of the Islamic world, the Khalifa. So obviously, when this treaty is going to be harsh on the Khalifa, who is the spiritual head of the Muslims, Muslims were going to be offended by the Britishers. So they did not like that this harsh treaty should be, signed between the Khalifa and the Britishers. So they were also against the Britishers. So to defend that Khalifa's temporal powers, a Khilafat committee was formed in Bombay in March 1919. At the Calcutta session in September 1920, Mahatma Gandhi, along with the Muslim leaders like Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali, convinced their leaders to start a non-cooperation movement in support of the Khilafat as well as Swaraj. So they are also called, they were famous Ali brothers. So both these brothers, they joined hands with Mahatma Gandhi and in support of the Khilafat as well as Swaraj. So all these leaders, Mahatma Gandhi's mission was to unite the Hindus and the Muslims. So this is the question bank for the portion that we have covered till now. We are going to cover this chapter in 5 portions. This is only the end of the first portion, children. And I have just given you a list of 6 1-mark questions and 5 long answers. And the long answers, for the answers of these long question answers, I have put up a PDF. Okay, so you will be writing all these answers from the PDF. You can take help from that PDF. And children, as I had advised you to make a question bank notebook, you people will be picking out 1-mark questions. This is your homework, children, 1-mark question, and you will be writing in your question bank notebooks. These are these are the 6 questions that I have given, but there may be many more which you will have to identify, pick out on your own and make your question bank notebook. In his famous book Hind Swaraj, written in the year 1909, Mahatma Gandhi declared that British rule was established in India with the cooperation of Indians and that survived only because of this cooperation. So if Indians refused to cooperate, British rule in India would collapse within a year and Swaraj would come. So Mahatma Gandhi proposed this non-cooperation movement because of these reasons. So, but he decided that this movement should unfold in stages. It should begin with the surrender of titles, the titles like Rai Sahib, etc., which were awarded by the British government, and a boycott of civil services, army, police, courts, and legislative councils, schools, foreign goods, all these, that means basically Indians will not be cooperating with the Britishers. So in the case, the government used repression, a full civil disobedience campaign would be launched. These were the stages in which the non-cooperation movement was going to be unfolded. Tussle within the Congress on the movement. Within the Congress also there were disagreements. Many within the Congress were reluctant to boycott the council elections and feared that the movement might lead to violence. After an intense tussle at the Congress session in Nagpur in the year 1920, a compromise was worked out and the non-cooperation program was adopted. So see how many 1-mark questions are there. In which year was the non-cooperation movement adopted? So these are the questions, children, which I have also summed up at the end of this portion. Now, non-cooperation Khilafat movement, January 1921. You have to keep a record of the dates. Now we are going to read the effects of this movement in towns, in villages. So one by one we are going to take up. First, the movement in the towns. In the towns, thousands of students, as it was planned, left government jobs and colleges, headmasters and teachers resigned, lawyers gave up their legal practices. And the second stage was the council elections were boycotted in most provinces, but the only province was Madras, where the Justice Party, the party of the non-Brahmins, felt that entering the council was one way of gaining some power. So only here the elections were conducted. Now, the effects of the non-cooperation movement on the economic front. Foreign goods were boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, and foreign cloth was burnt in huge bonfires. In many places, merchants and traders refused to trade in foreign goods and finance foreign cloth. The import of foreign cloth thus became halved between the year 1921 and 22, and its value dropped from 102 crore to rupees 57 crore, and people began discarding imported clothes. Thus, the production of Indian textile mills went up. So, not only this, people started boycotting the members of the society who were using the foreign cloth. So all these things were happening, but what was the reason that the non-cooperation Khilafat movement gradually slowed down in the cities? The first point is khadi cloth was more expensive than the mass-produced milk cloth, and poor people could not afford to buy it. Now the cloth which was produced by the Britishers, which was supplied by the Britishers, was cheap, and Indians, as they were poor, could afford to buy it. But the khadi cloth was more expensive. So, and next point is, for the movement to be successful, alternative Indian institutions had to be set up, but they were slow to come up. So students and teachers, they began trickling back. They began coming back, joining the government schools, and lawyers also started coming back to their work. Now this was the impact on the in the towns. Now impact on the countryside. The movement here was against the talukdars, the landlords, or you can call them zamindars, who demanded high rent, exorbitantly high rents, and a variety of other cesses or taxes. Peasants had to do begar. What is begar? It is working without being paid, and work at the landlord's farm without any payment, and tenants regularly evicted so they could not acquire rights over the leased lands. These were the problems faced by the peasants in the countryside. The peasant movement demanded reduction of revenue, abolition of begar, and social boycott of oppressive landlords. So you will find here that Swaraj had different meanings with different people. Swaraj was different for the peasants. The meaning of Swaraj was different for people working in the factories. Swaraj will be different. Meaning of Swaraj will be different for the workers working in the plantations. So for the workers, for the peasants in the countryside, Swaraj was reduction of revenue, abolition of begar, and social boycott of oppressive landlords. Right now, these people, their fights were limited to their own selfish motives. They were not thinking about the nationwide, movement. So in many places, Nai Dhobi Bands were organized to deprive landlords of services of even barbers and washermen. So these barbers and washermen also started in this movement. How did they participate? By not helping these landlords, by depriving these landlords of their services. As the movement spread in the year 1921, the houses of these talukdars, zamindars, merchants were attacked, bazaars were looted, and grain hoards were taken over again, will not be liked by Mahatma Gandhi, as it was all violence. Now we have read about the impact on the people living in towns. We have read about the impact of this movement on the peasants in the villages. Now let us read about the impact of this movement on the tribals. The colonial government had closed large forest areas, preventing tribals to collect fuel wood and fruits, which enraged them. This we have done in our forest chapter in class 9th. When the government began forcing them to contribute begar for a road building, they revolted. So this was the immediate cause. Earlier, we have read in class 9 how these Indian tribals were not allowed to enter the forest for their own basic needs. Now here, we will read about Eluri Sidaram Raju, who was a tribal leader of Gudem Hills of Andhra Pradesh, and he led these people. Now let us read about Alluri Sitaram Raju. We'll be marking a question there at the end. Write a short note on Alluri Sitaram Raju. I have put a PDF and you can refer to that PDF for the answers. Alluri Sitaram Raju claimed that he had special powers, could make correct astrological predictions, he could heal people and could survive even bullet shots. This was the same, the way, we have read in class 9th about Birsa Munda. Rebels proclaimed that he was an incarnation of God, that is, God who has come to earth as a human being. He was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi and persuaded people to wear khadi and to give up drinking. Till here, he was thinking as per Mahatma Gandhi, as per the preachings of Mahatma Gandhi, but he was against Mahatma Gandhi in this thought, which was a thought that he wanted that people should use violence to become free. So he asserted that India could be liberated only by the use of force or violence. So he was captured, he was executed in 1924 and became a folk hero. Now, after reading about the tribals, let us see how the movement, affected the plantation workers, or what was the meaning of Swaraj for the plantation workers. So now, this one mark question is very important. What is the Inland Immigration Act of 1859? So you can write in your question bank registers. So under this act, plantation workers were not permitted to leave the tea gardens without permission, which they were rarely given. So when they heard of this movement, thousands of workers defied the authorities, left the plantations and headed home. So Swaraj for the plantation workers was to leave the tea gardens and head back to their homes. But they never reached their destination. They were stranded on the way by the railway and steamer strike. This was the non in the first stage of non-cooperation movement. This was done. These were railway employees were on strike. So because of that, they were caught by the police and they were brutally beaten up. Why did Mahatma Gandhi decide to withdraw the non-cooperation movement? Now, Mahatma Gandhi felt that the movement was turning violent in many places and satyagrahis needed to be properly trained before they would be ready for mass struggles. They needed to be trained to be non-violent. Some leaders in the Congress were tired of mass struggles and wanted to participate in elections to the provincial councils set up by the Government of India Act of 1919. They wanted to be in politics and to bring about change. They felt that it was important to oppose the British policies within the councils and argue for reform. And now one mark important question. C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru formed the Swaraj Party within the Congress to argue for a return to council politics, and Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose pressed for more radical mass agitation and they wanted full independence, Purna Swaraj. Okay. Now, when all this was happening, worldwide economic depression, agricultural prices began to fall from 1926 and collapsed after 1930, and the demand for agricultural goods fell, exports declined, peasants found it difficult to sell their harvests and pay their revenue. In this background, by 1930, the country was in turmoil, and in this background, Tory government in Britain constituted a statutory commission under Sir John Simon to look into the functioning of the constitutional system in India and suggest changes. Now, what is Tory government? Tory government is a conservative party in Britain, and statutory commission is made by law. So, under Sir John Simon, why was the Simon Commission sent to India? To look into the constitutional system in India and to suggest some changes. But there were some drawbacks. So what was the major drawback? The major problem was that the commission did not have a single Indian member. They were all British. So if the suggestions were to be given for the Indians, some Indian members should have been included. After this commission came to India in the year 1928, it was greeted with the slogan, "Go back, Simon." To win them over, Viceroy Lord Irwin announced two things. One was the Dominion status for India and a round table conference to discuss a future constitution. So what is a dominion status? It is a autonomous communities within the British Empire and a roundtable conference to discuss a future constitution. So was it accepted? The offer of Lord Irwin did not satisfy the Congress leaders. The radicals became more assertive. Who were the radicals? You have done in the junior classes. Radicals were who wanted Purna Swaraj, full independence, and moderates and liberals were the ones who did not want absolute independence, but they wanted a constitutional framework within the country itself. So the liberals and moderates who were proposing a constitutional system within the framework of British Dominion gradually lost its influence. Under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress formalized the demand of Purna Swaraj for India, and it was declared that 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as Independence Day, when people were to take pledge to struggle for complete independence. Now this is the question bank for the portion that we have, the 10 slides that we have done just now. A few 1-mark questions I have put forward again, children, and for the answers to these long questions which are given there, these 5 questions, please refer to the PDF which I am attaching to this PPT. Now, Salt March and the Civil Disobedience Movement. Mahatma Gandhi found in salt a powerful symbol that could unite the nation. On 31st January 1930, he sent a letter to Viceroy Irwin stating 11 demands. So in these, the most stirring of all was the demand to abolish the salt tax. Salt was something which was consumed by the rich and the poor alike, and it was one of the most essential items of food. The tax on salt and the government monopoly over its production revealed the most oppressive phase of the British rule, according to Mahatma Gandhi. And Gandhiji's letter was an ultimatum that if these 11 demands were not fulfilled by 11th March, the Congress would launch a civil disobedience campaign. Now, Lord Irwin was unwilling to negotiate, so Mahatma Gandhi started this famous Salt March. It is also called Dandi March. Mahatma Gandhi started the Salt March accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. The march was over 240 miles from Gandhiji's ashram in Sabarmati to Dandi. The volunteers walked for 24 days and they walked for about 10 miles a day. Thousands came to hear Gandhiji, who told them the meaning of Swaraj and urged them to defy the British peacefully. On 6th April, he reached Dandi, violated the law by manufacturing salt and by boiling the sea water. This marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. So one more question, what marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement? Dandi March, okay? So how was the civil disobedience movement different from non-cooperation movement, children? People were now asked not to refuse cooperation, not only to refuse cooperation with the British, but also to break the colonial laws. In the civil disobedience movement, it dealt with breaking of the laws formed by the British government. The main aim in the civil disobedience movement was violation of laws. It was carried out by breaking salt law, forest laws, and also by holding demonstrations. The civil disobedience movement was launched basically to attain Purna Swaraj, and because of these 11 demands of the Congress which were denied. But the non-cooperation movement, it did not deal with the violation of laws. It was carried out through peaceful demonstrations and picketing of the foreign shops. The movement was launched in order to unify the Hindus and Muslims and to attain Swaraj. These were the basic differences. The consequences of the civil disobedience movement. The colonial government began asserting the Congress leaders one by one, arresting. So this led to violent clashes in many places. When Abdul Ghaffar Khan was arrested, angry crowds demonstrated in the streets of Peshawar, where many were killed. A month later, when Mahatma Gandhi was arrested, industrial workers in Sholapur attacked police posts, municipal buildings, law courts, railway stations, and all structures that symbolize the British rule. Peaceful satyagrahis were attacked by the Britishers, women and children were beaten, and about 100,000 were arrested. In this situation, Mahatma Gandhi again decided to call up this movement and entered into a pact with Lord Irwin on 5th March 1931. And what was this Gandhi-Irwin Pact, which was signed on 5th March 1931? In this pact, Mahatma Gandhi agreed to participate in the Round Table Conference in London, and the government agreed to release the political prisoners. So if Mahatma Gandhi attends the Round Table Conference, they would be releasing the political prisoners. So the Round Table Conference in the year 1931, December, Gandhiji went to London, but the negotiations broke down and he returned disappointed. What were the consequences of the Round Table Conference? Government began a new cycle of repression. They were very unhappy that this conference was a failure. Khan of Abdul Ghaffar Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru both were in jail. Congress had been declared illegal. A series of measures had been imposed to prevent meetings, demonstrations, and boycotts. So Gandhi again relaunched the civil disobedience movement, but by 1934 it lost its momentum. Why did this movement lost its momentum for the second time? We are going to read how this movement, civil disobedience movement, was seen by the rich peasants, the poor peasants, and the industrial working classes, the business classes. This is what we are going to read just now. For the rich peasant communities, they were very active in this movement. They were very hard hit by trade depression and the falling prices. The refusal of the government to reduce the revenue made them the supporters of this civil disobedience movement. But they were deeply disappointed when the movement was earlier called off in the year 1931, which we have read earlier, without the revenue rates being revised. So, when the movement started again in the year 1932, many of them refused to participate, okay, because they thought that again this would also end. And what about the poorer peasantry? As the depression continued, the small tenants found it difficult to pay their rent. They wanted the unpaid rent to the landlord to be remitted. The Congress was unwilling to support this campaign as they thought that it might upset the rich peasants. So if they try to help the poor peasants, the rich peasants are going to be upset with them. So the relationship between the poor peasants and the Congress, they remained really uncertain. Now the industrial working classes theme was the reason if the Congress was helping the industrial working classes, the business classes would be upset with them. So the industrial working classes did not participate in the civil disobedience movement in large numbers except in the Nagpur region. So, 1 mark question. Some workers did participate in the selective programs like the boycott of foreign goods, low wages, and poor working conditions, but the Congress was reluctant to include their demands as they felt they would alienate the industrialists from the movement. Obviously, if they try to help the working classes, the business classes would not be there with the Congress. So now the business classes, they wanted protection against the import of foreign goods and a rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage imports. They formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries in 1927. But after the failure of the Round Table Conference, they lost their enthusiasm. Now, the role of women in this movement. Women participated in protest marches and also went to jail on Gandhiji's call. Yet, this did not change the way the position of women was visualized. Gandhiji was convinced that it was the duty of women to look after home, be good mothers and good wives. And Congress, every time it was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization and only wanted their symbolic presence. So women also were not very enthusiastic. Now, these are the social groups we are going to read now who were not moved by the concept of Swaraj. One were the Dalits, then the second were the Muslim organizations, and these two organizations were there. So first of all, let us read about the Dalits. For long, the Congress had ignored the Dalits for the fear of offending the conservative high caste Hindus. Mahatma Gandhi wanted to include them and called them Harijans. Now, this was the time when Mahatma Gandhi wanted each and every social group to unite under this umbrella of Congress to fight against the Britishers. So he called them Harijans, organized satyagraha to secure their entry into temples and public places, and many Dalit leaders began organizing themselves, demanding reserved seats in educational institutions and a separate electorate that would choose Dalit members for legislative councils. Thus, their participation was limited in this movement. Second Roundtable Conference, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who organized the Dalits into the Depressed Classes Association, clashed with Mahatma Gandhi at the Roundtable Conference, demanding separate electorates for Dalits. One mark important question: who organized the Dalits under the Depressed Classes Association? Now, the British government accepted the demand because they were very happy to see that the Dalits were not uniting with the Congress. But Gandhiji began a fast unto death as he believed that it would slow down the process of their integration into the society. Because Gandhiji was believing that, unless and until they are united, we would not be gaining independence. So Ambedkar finally accepted Gandhiji's position, and the result was the Pune Pact of September 1932. So what was the Pune Pact of September 1932? This pact gave the depressed classes reserved seats in provincial and central legislative councils, but they were to be voted in by the general electorate, one electorate. And the second group, which was not very happy with this movement, was the Muslim political organizations. After the decline of the non cooperation Khilafat movement, a large section of the Muslims felt alienated from the Congress. They did not feel that they were the part of Congress. From the mid 1920s, the Congress came to be more visibly associated with the Hindu religious nationalist groups like the Hindu Mahasabha. So they thought that Congress, they were, biased towards the Hindus. Their relations worsened and led to clashes and riots. The differences were over the question of representations in the future assemblies. Thus, Muslims also did not respond to the call for a united struggle. Now, what were the factors which were responsible for bringing a sense of collective belongingness in the Indians? So it came partly through the experience of united struggles. We'll read about icons and symbols, their roles. We'll be reading about fiction and folklore and reinterpretation of history. So one by one, let us take them up. First, we read about the experience of united struggles. All these satyagrahas, they were slowly and gradually putting in a feeling of oneness among the Indians. Now, during the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, a tricolor flag was designed which had 8 lotuses representing 8 provinces of British India and a crescent moon representing Hindus and the Muslims. So, these were the icons and symbols which are going to infuse a feeling of oneness among Indians. By 1921, Gandhiji had designed a tricolor Swaraj flag which had a spinning wheel in the center, which represented the Gandhian ideal of self-help. So all these things, you are going to make one mark questions. What represented the Gandhian ideal of self-help? That is the spinning wheel. The identity of India also came to be visually associated with the image of Bharat Mata, so which was first created by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Children, one mark question. And Abhindranath Tagore painted the famous image of Bharat Mata, which was portrayed as a calm, composed, divine and spiritual figure. So who painted the famous image of Bharat Mata? Abhindranath Tagore. And who created? It was Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. So Bharat Mata, so every Indian, you would see this as their own mother. So this was a very important factor in bringing about a sense of belongingness. Third is the fiction and the folklore. In the 1970s, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay wrote Vande Mataram as a hymn to the motherland. It was later included in his novel Anand Mat, which was widely sung during the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. So, children, one mark important question. Who wrote Vande Mataram and who wrote the novel Anand Mat? In Bengal, Rabindranath Tagore began collecting ballads, nursery rhymes and myths for folk revival, and in Madras, Natesa Sastri published a 4-volume collection of folk tales, The Folklore of Southern India. So, one more question: who wrote the famous Folklore of Southern India? So, you'll write Natesa Sastri. Reinterpretation of history is the fourth factor. Indians began looking into the past to discover India's great achievements. After the Britishers came to India, they were, glorifying their own rule here. They were not, putting forward in the history books. The glorification of Indian past was taken out. So Indians again, started adding that, reinterpreting into the history books. They wrote about art and architecture, science and maths, religion, culture, law, philosophy, craft and trade of the ancient times. It urged the readers to take pride in India's great achievement of the past. Now we come to the last question bank. Again, these are the 5 1-mark questions, and you should be adding a few more of yours in your question bank notebooks. And the answers to these long questions I have put in the PDF, which is attached with this PPT. Children, the last I have made a mind map. This is the mind map of this whole chapter. Please go through it. I have put arrows so that it is convenient for you to understand what happened when. So very silently, you can just use this mind map for recapitulation of this chapter.